Hello, I'm Roshdy Ebrahim, and you're watching the Energy Economist channel. OPEC organization is composed of 12 countries: Algeria, Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Libya, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Venezuela. OPEC's member countries hold about 2/3 of the world's proven oil reserves, about 900 billion barrels, and supply about 40% of the world's oil production, about 50% of total exports. The objective of OPEC is to stabilize the international price range of crude oil by controlling the amount of crude oil sold in worldwide markets. It's clear that the demand is close to the maximum production capacity of both OPEC and petroleum exporting countries not part of OPEC. Of course, this high price and high production rate maximizes the income of the petroleum exporting countries as long as the petroleum importing countries can maintain healthy economies. Thus, despite the high cost of crude oil, OPEC has less influence on the crude price than it did previously. Of course, if OPEC were to decide to cut production, the price would greatly increase. However, with all the OPEC countries producing at maximum capacity with the exception of Iraq and Saudi Arabia, there is not much OPEC can do to lower the price. Because the consumer pays the price of petroleum products, not crude oil, a shortage of refinery capacity can also raise the price consumers pay as well as local taxes. The influence of OPEC also has been reduced by the increase in the amount of petroleum exported by countries not part of OPEC, particularly Russia and Norway, which are the second and the third largest exporters of petroleum, respectively. Iraq, with 115 billion barrels, has the third largest reserves of conventional oil, to that of Saudi Arabia, 267 billion barrels, and Iran 132 billion barrels. However, Iraq only ranks 14th in amount of oil produced. This is because of the United Nations sanctions placed on Iraq after the 1991 Arabian Gulf War, initiated by Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. More recently, Iraq's production is even less because of the obstruction by those in Iraq opposite to the occupation of the United States and Great Britain and to the present Iraq government. The facilities and equipment of the production and transport of petroleum are also much below standard in Iraq, but don't warrant upgrading until the threat of obstruction is mitigated. Obviously, if Iraq were to achieve full production, the petroleum price would greatly drop unless the rest of OPEC would cut their production accordingly. The unrest in Nigeria, an OPEC member, also threatens to reduce production in the 8th largest exporter of petroleum. North Africa and the Middle East countries affected by the Arab Spring revolutions a couple of years earlier had recovered and were producing oil at the same levels as before the revolutions. OPEC members looked to Saudi Arabia and the wealthier members to curb their production to keep the price up, but the Saudis, Kuwaitis, and Emirates were unwilling to give up their market share for the benefit of Venezuela and other poorer members. Within OPEC itself, there is no real mechanism for setting quotas. It's not based on a country's proven reserves, or Venezuela would have the lion's share of the quota. It's also not based on population or on GDP. As OPEC was producing approximately 40% of the world's oil, any decision to cut or increase production would have an impact on global supplies. Once the word came out that OPEC was not going to cut production, the price of oil began falling. At the same time, a number of rigs in the USA stopped pumping because they could not produce oil profitably if the price fell below $60. Projects to develop Venezuela's extra heavy oil were also put on hold, and there were questions as to whether Brazil's Lula field could produce at a profit if oil were in the $50 range, as well as fields in the Gulf of Mexico. Despite the drop in the price of oil, OPEC's wealthier members held firm in the succeeding biennial meeting and continued to maintain their production. Kuwait was believed to be best placed to weather the low oil price for several years, but the Saudis also reportedly could still meet their annual budget for 4 years owing to their sovereign wealth fund, currency reserves, and other assets. It was even reported that they were looking at trimming their budget so they could continue running with oil priced at $50 a barrel for 8 years. Free world oil production is on the rise again after the 1974 to 1975 slowdown in response to the quadrupling of energy prices and a worldwide recession. Free world oil production is currently approaching 53 million barrels per day, of which more than 60% is supplied by OPEC countries. Non-cartel countries' oil production is also expanding briskly, perhaps by 9 to 10% per annum. In spite of the new discoveries inducing those in Alaska, North Africa, Mexico, and the North Sea, these additional sources will only add 6 years of life to the world's present requirements. Middle East producers are still very much in the driver's seat, aided by the Americans who seem unwilling to force conservation measures that would tend to weaken oil prices. But OPEC members are also facing considerable problems in determining a pricing structure for crude oil exports, assuming that economic rather than political considerations will determine future pricing policies. Some of the factors that will affect future pricing are: 1. OPEC must take account of its existing reserves and their impact on future revenues in determining prices. Saudi Arabia and Emirates have the bulk of these reserves and are using their leverage to exert a moderating influence. 2. Other OPEC countries don't have extensive reserves and are spending their oil revenues rapidly. Their objective is to increase oil prices as quickly as possible to pay for imports and rapidly growing debt charges. 3. OPEC's share of total free world production is 63% and declining. Non-cartel countries respond quickly to changes in price, thereby providing additional production in response to higher prices and or conservation measures by OPEC. 4. Non-conventional oil and oil substitutes are rapidly being developed. Higher prices will bring many more of these developments on stream. If you want to learn more about OPEC's policy, you could do so in my book, Economics of Oil and Gas Production, which is published on Amazon. Check it out at the link in the description. Please take a second to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to also hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching and goodbye.